Students, just wanted to go over a couple of things about the hand study in clay project. So at this point, you might be thinking about adding something to the hand sculpture. If you're interested in adding another element to it, other than just having a hand sculpture, maybe you wanted to add something in the hand or on the hand or, whatever you were thinking. So I wanted to just go over some stages of clay in case you haven't had clay instruction in a while. So if you want to attach something, you need to have some knowledge of the different stages of clay. So right now, my hand sculptures are becoming more leather hard. So this sculpture more specifically is definitely not plastic clay anymore, where like you squish it and it is moldable. This is much harder. I can still mold it. I can still carve into it really easily, but it holds shape very well. It's dried out a bit. It's going to be much more carving now at this point than molding. I can still add to it at this point, though. So this is kind of what I wanted to emphasize today. So different stages of clay. You've got the plastic stage or the wet stage. This is like fresh out of the bag, very moldable, still has a lot of moisture content, and that's what we started out with. So the plastic stage. Then there's the leather hard stage. So these are two pieces of slab that were cut. They've been allowed to dry somewhat, so that they hold their shape. They can bend without snapping, but they're much more solid, but can be added together really easily by scoring and slipping. This is actually one of my favorite stages of working with clay because there are so many possibilities with this. You can make it add more moisture if you really wanted to. It's really a great stage for connecting things and carving as well. So lots of possibilities with the leather hard stage. And it also, like with the hand sculpture, if you want it to hold a certain position without it like kind of drooping, or once it gets to the leather hard stage, it's much easier to work with. So the other stage is bone dry. I didn't have any great examples of it in the classroom right now. Everything just got fired, so I just have these small examples, but you can tell the difference in color even. Bone dry clay becomes this kind of chalky white, whereas the leather hard stage, it's still, you can feel that it's still damp. It's almost kind of cold to the touch. Bone dry is chalky. It's a much lighter color. If you try to bend it at all, it just snaps. This is the most vulnerable stage of clay. So if you make a sculpture and allow it to become bone dry, that's when you have to be the most careful when you're transporting it, moving it anywhere, because any kind of bump can crack stuff off. So just be aware that the bone dry stage, while it's necessary to get it to the stage before we can fire it, is the most vulnerable. So you have to be most careful with your sculpture when it's bone dry. So to attach something, and the other stages are after firing. So we've got bisque firing, which is after the first firing, and then glaze firing is after you add glaze. So if I wanted to add something to a sculpture that is already in the leather hard stage, and I'm using something that I made out of plastic clay, I would have to make it so that these two clay bodies become one. So the moisture content has to equal out between the two clay bodies. If this is drier than this and I just slap it on there and continue on with my sculpture, this will dry really fast, or at a different pace than this. And this is a smaller piece, so this actually might dry faster. But what's going to happen is these two pieces are not actually connected. And even if you like took it and you blended it in really nice and it looks really blended, it's still not truly connected. Once those pieces dry, and they will dry at different paces because this has a different moisture content than this, they will just snap apart. They'll just come apart. I've had pieces that people have put in the kiln where it like even looked like, you know, it was bone dry stage. It looked like it was together, no problem. After bisque firing it, it fell apart because it was not scored and slipped. So that's really important that you don't forget to do this stage. So let's say I wanted to add something to this sculpture. I'm just going to quickly make a little something here. Of course, I would take more time and make this more interesting, but right now I'm just, for demonstration purposes, trying to give you guys something to look at here. All right, so let's say I made a much better flower than this. You guys get it. I'm just trying to do this quick. So I would want to attach this somewhere. So maybe I wanted to attach it on the tip of a finger, okay? So if I were going to do that, I would need to score and slip. And I know I mentioned this in one of the previous videos. Scoring is referring to breaking up the surface of the clay body on both sides. So I'm just kind of lightly opening up the surface of that clay with my needle tool. And then if you made slip, great. If you don't have it, adding water to this and maybe just like a little extra clay to the leather hard will help it stick. Or if you have vinegar at home, that will also kind of help attach it. But you want to use either water, slip, and slip is simply adding clay to water and letting it dissolve in the water. This is mostly water. I can show you an example of slip real quick. So here's an example of slip. This is clay that has been dissolved in water, so it's has a consistency of like pudding. So if you want to make your own slip for this project, you can. You don't have to. It's not a big project, so water should be okay. Water or vinegar. So I'm attaching that to the finger. And at this point, you can see it's just kind of pressed on there. What I can do is take some more plastic clay and make a very small coil to put around that connection just to reinforce it. And then I can take a tool. Right now I'm just going to use a pencil. I'm going to come in here and just kind of blend it together. So what you want to do is you want to compress those two clay bodies together so that where it was scored and slipped, those two bodies of clay will squish together. And by scoring it, we're opening up those two clay bodies and allowing that moisture to kind of transfer between the two clay bodies, giving it more access to becoming one piece of clay versus two that were just kind of slapped together. So I'm just going to use my pencil to kind of blend those together. And once I've blended that coil in and let it sit for a little bit, I can come back and kind of redefine the finger there so that it doesn't look like just one, you know, like they aren't really connected. I wanted to kind of define that finger there. Once they've kind of sat for a while, I can come back in there and kind of carve that away a little bit. But just want to give you an idea. So like if you're connecting something in between the fingers, again, it's the same process. So if you were making something, like here, I'll roll out a coil quick. If you were making something that you wanted to kind of like wrap around the hand, there are certain contact points that you might want to connect it. I wouldn't necessarily need to connect it there. It's not really touching, but maybe here on the pinky where it's touching there and on the thumb. So again, the same process. I would score here with my needle tool, score on the plastic clay as well. add the water, and if I wanted to, a little bit of clay, but I think it should be okay if you just attach it, compress the two clay bodies together so it kind of squishes that water and air out of those scored areas. Add a little coil there to kind of reinforce that connection. Blend it in without getting my head in the camera. So really working on making sure that connection is solid and that you have scored and slipped. Even the littlest amount of scoring and slipping will make all the difference in making sure those pieces stay together. So yeah, that's how you would connect it. Remember, score, slip, compress. If you need to, add an extra little coil just to reinforce that connection. You can always come back and refine it and make it look better if you don't like how it looks after it's been attached. Just allow those two clay bodies to kind of become one, okay? So just kind of reiterate, if you're connecting a piece to your hand sculpture, think about the different stages of clay. So you've got plastic, which is the wet stage. You've got leather hard stage, which is when it starts to dry, but it's, still workable. Bone dry is the point where you really can't attach anymore. If it has become bone dry, it's much harder to add moisture to that. Most of the time I don't even bother. So don't allow your clay to get bone dry if you still plan on adding things to it or changing it. So remember to wrap up your work really well at night. If it's becoming too hard, if it's leather hard and you want it to be more workable, spray it down really good and then wrap it up really tight at night to allow it to kind of absorb some more of that moisture so it's more workable the next day. And then, of course, there's the firing stages, which is bisque fire and then glaze fire. So score, slip, coil, compress. That's attaching. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. I hope this helps.